I get it. You're staring at a list of subwoofer kits, wondering if any of them will actually give you the boom you want without turning your car into a vibrating mess, and you definitely don't want to drop a few $100 on something that sounds great on paper but ends up just eating power. The last thing you need is a one-size-fits-all solution that either underdelivers or forces you into a complicated wiring nightmare. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Alpine PXE C80 OPTIM8 bundle tries to be that all-in-one answer. It pairs an 8-channel high-resolution digital sound processor with two SSSB12 subwoofers, and it throws in an R2S653 head unit that's supposed to talk to the processor in real time. What that means in everyday use is you get a single box that can both amplify your low frequencies and let you fine-tune them from a PC or even an iPhone. For people who have already upgraded to a high-resolution source, say a custom head unit that can play FLAC or DSD files, this processor promises to keep the rest of the audio chain from getting left behind. If you've ever tried to get a decent bass response with a generic amp and a single sub, you know the frustration of boom that either drowns out vocals or just sounds muddy. The key with the PXE C80 is the 8-channel architecture. Instead of cramming all the bass into one big channel, the processor splits the workload across multiple outputs, giving you tighter control over each speaker's phase and crossover point. In a practical sense, that translates to a cleaner low end when you're cruising on the highway and the bass doesn't mask the road noise, and a tighter punch when you're stuck in stop-and-go traffic and you want that kick without shaking the dash. Who should actually consider this bundle? First, anyone who's already invested in a high-end head unit or is planning to install one that supports Alpine's OPTIM8 software. The real-time tuning via the app is only as good as the source you feed it. If you're still listening to low-bit MP3s from a cheap phone, you won't notice the subtle improvements. Second, car audio enthusiasts who like to spend a weekend tweaking settings rather than just plug and play. The app gives you access to parametric EQ, time alignment, and even a built-in SPL meter, so you can measure how the bass behaves at different seats and adjust accordingly. Third, people who need a compact solution. The processor's chassis is small enough to hide under a seat or in a console, and the mounting brackets let you angle the unit to fit tight spaces, something you'll appreciate if you're dealing with a mid-size sedan rather than a full-size SUV. On the flip side, you might want to skip this if you're after a budget-friendly upgrade. The bundle's price reflects the processor's capabilities, and the two SSSB12 subwoofers, while respectable, are not the massive, high-excursion units you'd find in a dedicated competition rig. If you just want a simple bass boost for daily commuting, a single-powered subwoofer with a basic line-level input could give you acceptable results for a fraction of the cost. Also, if you're not comfortable with software tuning, the learning curve could feel steep. The app is powerful, but it isn't a set-it-and-forget wizard. You'll need to spend time learning what each parameter does and how it translates to the feel inside the car. In real-world use, the biggest strength I've seen people talk about with the OPTIM8 line is the ability to match the sub's output to the vehicle's interior acoustics. Because the processor lets you adjust the crossover point for each sub independently, you can set one sub to dominate the rear seats while the other fills the front footwell, creating a balanced bass envelope. In a test car with a fairly quiet cabin, the two 12-inch subwoofers delivered enough pressure to feel the beat without overwhelming conversation volume, something you rarely get from a single larger sub that tends to dominate the whole space. The high-resolution bandwidth also means you can hear the finer details in a track like Daft Punk's Giorgio by Moroder, where the bass line has subtle variations that most cheap amps just flatten out. The hidden trade-off comes with the power demand. The 8-channel processor draws a noticeable amount of current, so you'll need a solid wiring harness and a battery that can handle the load without sagging. In a car with a modest alternator, you might notice dimming lights if you crank the bass too high. That's why Alpine bundles a dedicated power cable and a fuse block, but the installer still needs to route it cleanly and possibly upgrade the battery if they plan to push the subwoofers to their limits. Another practical weakness is the reliance on the app for the most accurate tuning. While the software is fairly intuitive, it does assume you have a decent microphone or the built-in SPL sensor works well in your specific car. In a noisy environment, the meter can pick up road noise, leading to a tuning that sounds good.